friends, welcome to Craft Friday. My name is Robert Mahar. I am an artist maker and Spoonflower ambassador based in Northern California. I am delighted to say that this is my third annual Craft Friday. I love this day that Spoonflower has set aside as an alternative to Black Friday, and they have filled it with so many great free DIY tutorials from creatives across the globe. And it's really an invitation to you to take a little time out of your busy schedule, sit down and make something beautiful with your family and friends. Now, I've been thinking a lot about my project for this year, and if I'm being honest, I get a little sentimental about the holidays. I think a lot of us do, and I wanted to come up with a project that was a memento of one of my favorite parts of any gathering, and that's the meal. Now, I know, it's not all about the delicious food, but it's really about gathering loved ones around the table to spend some quality time together. So my concept, it's really simple. I went into the Spoonflower marketplace, I picked out some patterns that I loved, and I had a custom table runner and napkins made for my dining room table. And the thought is this: at the end of every meal, your guests sign your table runner, and in the days and weeks that follow, you invest a little time in embroidering those signatures into the cloth. And what develops is a sort of textile guestbook documenting all of the folks that you've invited into your home. And my hope is that it'll come out at every special occasion, and that as the years progress, those stitch signatures will fill the entire table runner, serving as a beautiful reminder of friends and loved ones that you have shared some great quality time with. Now, let me show you how this very simple project comes together.
I love the idea of green as a holiday neutral, and these watercolor patterns perfectly disguise any drips or spills. Think about what you want your guests to use when they're writing their names on the fabric. They could use a number 2 pencil, a permanent marker, or my personal preference are these erasable markers from the office supply store. They were intended for use on paper, but some clever crafter figured out that if you write on fabric and then apply heat, the ink instantly disappears. So heat up that iron, run it across the surface of the fabric, and the ink magically disappears. If you or a guest need an instant do-over, this is a great way to achieve that. By way of example, let's complete one name. I'm writing a name out using the erasable marker, and will then stitch this into the surface of the fabric. But first you'll need to gather your embroidery supplies. You'll need an embroidery hoop, an embroidery needle, embroidery floss, and thread snips, or a small pair of scissors. Separate your hoop and load the fabric, centering it around the name you want to stitch. Tighten that toggle at the top to achieve a nice, smooth surface. Thread a 12 to 16 inch piece of embroidery floss through the eye of the needle, and we're going to backstitch this name. You'll come up 1/4 inch from the end of your first line, and then stitch backwards to the beginning of that line. True to its name, we'll be skipping 1 stitch length ahead and then stitching backwards to meet the previous stitch. Always enter the needle into the fabric from the back side, pushing it up through the surface and then drawing the thread through. Then stitch back and meet the end of the previous stitch. In doing so, we'll begin to create a continuous, solid, bold line. Each stitch length is about 1/4 inch in length. Again, exiting from the back side, drawing the thread through, and then stitching backwards to meet the end of the previous stitch. The back stitch is a great core embroidery stitch and works perfectly when you're stitching names, and in this case, signatures. The embroidery thread that I'm using is known as pearl cotton, and I'm using a size 12 in a beautiful shade of variegated green. If I were using a standard 6-strand embroidery floss, I would likely only use 2 or 3 strands in order to achieve the fine lines of the signature. This signature looks great in the back stitch, but I want to show you how to elevate it with the whipped back stitch. Draw a length of the same embroidery floss, pull it up through the fabric just to the left of your first stitch, turn your needle on its side, and weave it through each consecutive stitch along this line of the letter. You want to make certain that you're always weaving under the stitches in the same direction. In my case, I'm always weaving from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. You can also do it from the left to the right, just be consistent. You're not entering or exiting the fabric, you're not piercing the fabric, you're simply weaving it under the existing stitches on the surface of the fabric. And you're going to work this all the way to the end of that first line, and then you'll re-enter the fabric just to the right-hand side of that very last stitch. You'll then continue this process with each and every line in that letter. All right, let's speed things up for just a few seconds, and while you watch me whiz my way through the whip stitch, let me tell you why I love a whipped back stitch. When I originally stitched this signature, it's likely that a few of my stitches were a little crooked, perhaps some didn't exactly meet the previous stitch when I stitched backwards, but by whipping it with a length of the same color embroidery floss and weaving it through all of those consecutive stitches, what I do is simply smooth over any of those previous imperfections. You end up with a stitching that looks as though it were written by hand, which really is our goal in stitching these signatures into the surface of the table runner. The sample signature looks great, and there are just a couple of steps to help us finish up our project. The first thing we'll do is remove the embroidery hoop, loosen that toggle at the top, and set the outer and the inner hoop aside. And then we're going to iron our fabric on the back of the stitching. This is going to help us achieve two objectives. One, applying heat will remove any of the visible ink left from the erasable marker on the front side of our fabric. And two, it'll help remove the divot left in the fabric by having loaded it into the hoop. Now when you flip the fabric over, it's nice, smooth, and table ready.
Thank you so much for taking a little time to spend with me on this Spoonflower Craft Friday. I hope you'll consider this project. I think it's got all of the makings of a potential heirloom piece that you'll be excited to bring out to share with your guests at every special occasion. Happy making, my friends.